I'm Mary Thane. This is Barely Conscious, and I'm here today with Noah Khan.
Howdy.
And today we're going to be talking about the Night Witches of Soviet Russia. It's 1941. Imagine you are a young woman living in Soviet Russia.
Gotcha.
World War II has been going on for 3 years. All the men are off fighting in the war, and you're sick of sewing things and donating things, and you don't really feel like you're actually helping anymore. You can feel it? You got it?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Then you hear news of an all-women regiment in the army called the 588th.
Sign me up.
This is an all-female regiment. 2,000 women applied, and only 400 were accepted. The ages range from 17 to 26, so these were very young women, and the 588 were trained just like the men, treated just like the men, and had to do all the things the men did. But they had to learn it all in 6 months.
Wow.
Which is crazy, because normally you would have 2 to 3 years to learn that. But they had to do it in 6 months, because the Soviet Union was short on soldiers. These women bomber pilots, they were feared and loathed by the Germans. Any German who downed a night witch was immediately awarded the Iron Cross.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah. They used biplanes that were normally used for crop dusting.
So they just strapped some guns on those babies, or what?
Basically, they were very rickety. They made a ton of noise when they flew, and they were made out of plywood and canvas. They had no heating. Like, it was awful. The night witches, they didn't have radios, they didn't have radar, and the way that they, calculated their flight path were with maps and rulers. Really old-fashioned stuff, especially even for World War II. But they did have their advantages.
Yes.
Their maximum speed was slower than the stalling speed of Nazi planes. So these planes were slow enough that in order for the Germans to get down to their speed, their planes would stall. So they would stop and they would crash.
Oh man.
Yeah, and you can't really be secretive. You can't, attack all that well if your planes make a ton of noise.
Yeah.
So they operated in stealth mode. As they approached German targets, they would idle their engines and glided their way to the base or wherever they were going to attack.
Did that work well?
It did. They didn't use radios, so radio locators couldn't pick them up. They couldn't be picked up on radar because they had no heat trace because they were so cold. It was the most miserable time for these women, but at the same time, it was almost impossible for them to be sighted.
Wow.
Yeah, they would fly 8 or more missions every night because they had such small numbers, and because the planes could only carry 2 bombs at a time. Because of their idling tactic, the Germans would have no idea if they were attacking. The only sound you could hear was, the whooshing sound of the, tarps that were on this plane, and by then it was way too late. So the sounds reminded the Germans of witches' broomsticks, and that's how they got the name the Night Witches.
That's terrifying.
The Germans at Stalingrad developed what the Russians called a flak circus, flax being the guns, and they would put them in circles around probable targets so that the Night Witches would, try to attack. The Night Witches developed their own technique. They decided to start flying in groups of 3. 2 would go in and, on purpose, attract the attention of the Germans. So then the flak guns would aim at them, the searchlights would point at them, and then the 2 pilots would separate very quickly, flying in opposite directions. And then the 3rd pilot, she would fly in through the dark path cleared by the 2 others. She would drop her bombs, and then they would do it again.
Huh.
I mean, it was insane. That's absolutely terrifying to have to fly into the line of fire deliberately to do that. But it worked really, really, really well.
I mean, with Germany being the fatherland and everything, I bet this really hurt their feelings.
Yeah, definitely. They hated him. Now, the leader of the 588th was Marina Raskova. She was the first woman to become an aviator for the Soviet Union. She petitioned to Joseph Stalin to make these regiments. She was in charge of all 3. And she gave a speech convincing the Soviet Union that women could be used in the war and that they should be. The Soviet Union was the first to allow women to fly combat missions, ever.
So this Marina Raskova, what's her story? I haven't really heard of her before.
Well,
Hello.
Hi. If you could just introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, I'm Pamela Dell.
Author of The Soviet Night Witches, Brave Women Bomber Pilots of World War II. What do you know about Marina Raskova?
She was amazing. I mean, she was a very disciplined woman. She finally became interested in aviation in 1931, I think. And she became the first Russian woman to qualify as an aviation navigator. You know, she went on that long distance continuous flight with two other women in the crew.
Right.
They were crossing from Moscow, I believe, to the far edge of southern Siberia. Before they actually got to their destination, they ran out of fuel. She had to bail out because she was the navigator, and so she sat in the nose of the plane. You know, she was rescued and reunited with her crew. These three women received what was called the Order of Lenin. They were the first women to be awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union.
Whoa.
Yeah. In the end, 261 women served in the regiment, flying more than 30,000 missions in total. They took 24,000 combat flights and dropped 23,000 tons of bombs. They lost only 30 pilots, and 24 of their flyers were awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. Raskova died in 1943 when she was finally sent to the front line. She was given the very first state funeral of World War II, and her ashes were buried in Kremlin. If it wasn't for her, and it wasn't for the Night Witches, Germany might not have surrendered so easily. They truly were very important to World War II, and it's amazing that they are hardly mentioned in history.